Hello, welcome to the second part of the lecture for the Human Rights Beyond Western Perspectives topic. In the previous recording, I have tried to emphasize some of the criticisms that emerge from the non-Western world as sources of insight to reimagine and understand what human rights might mean from the perspective of people whose experience is somehow excluded from the discourse of human rights. In that criticism, I have tried to highlight, for example, the ways in which Eurocentric values were universalized, were regarded as universal. Individualism, consumerism, materialism, and other forms of ideas that were incorporated within, or that were implicitly accepted within the human rights discourse, somehow were universalized through other important rights such as the right to life. And also we have tried to highlight the ways in which human rights actually leaves out or forgets the historical violence, the structural inequality that exists in the world, and simply starts from a theoretical premise which says that all people are born free and equal. And also we have tried to say a few words about the lack of diversity within the human rights discourse, which means that if from different parts of the world there are different ways of understanding nature, different ways of becoming a human being. But the idea of the human being that is implicitly accepted through the human rights discourse does not take into account the types of diversities that exist in the world. People in different places understand themselves. What is important for them is often defined on the basis of their experience, culture, tradition, beliefs, and so on. So now, because this topic focuses on human rights perspectives beyond the Western understanding, in this part of the recording, I'll try to reflect on some of the alternative understandings of or alternative worldviews that emerge from the non-Western world. As I have explained before, when we say non-Western, we're not simply considering that all places and people that are not West are similar, so we can put them in one word, which is called non-Western. I'm simply putting those the non-Western world in one word for the sake of this lecture, but we should take into account that this is a very diverse world. Probably the only similarity that it has is its exclusion from the dominant discourse, the dominant understanding, or the dominant power systems that exist in the world. So in this part of the lecture, I will talk about some of the ways in which, for example, nature is imagined. In the Western understanding of nature, the human being and the nature have been regarded as antagonistic entities where man would go out to control and to have dominion on earth and nature. So we'll try to reflect alternative other ways of understanding nature. And we'll try to see also certain spiritualism that exists in the world. For example, there is Confucianism, Hinduism, Islam, indigenous beliefs, Christianity, Shintoism, many other types of religious beliefs. These beliefs somehow provide certain ideas in relation to what it means to be human. For example, the Christian doctrine of natural law, or being a human and individual salvation was important in informing, in shaping the way modern human rights understand the human as an individual and the human very much interested in self-interest. So it's similarly, there are spiritual values and beliefs that inform important principles in society in the non-Western world. And we'll try to take a few examples, and I'll try to reflect on those. And also the importance of human responsibility is also an important point. In the human rights discourse, we have this entrenchment or this emphasis on the right of the individual. But it's not just the right of the individual or the duty of the individual, but also the duty of the individual as well as the right of the individual together, which means that certain religious beliefs, for example, or traditional philosophies and ideas emphasize on responsibility of the individual, not just the right of the individual in relation to society. That will be an area we'll be reflecting. And another point would be communal understandings, communal philosophies, communal life, the understanding of life as a relationship among human and non-human beings. And that is also another important source that might inform human rights in a different way. And also we'll try to see what type of rights could emerge from these worldviews. And probably I would leave that for you. What I would like to encourage you when I discuss this, as we discuss on alternative worldviews, is that in whatever places you live, I encourage you to reflect on some of the fundamental societal understandings of the human. What does it mean to be human? Because this idea is an evolving idea. Humanity is not simply defined on the basis of the theories that we have, but also on the basis of our practices and beliefs. So it will be interesting to understand how we understand ourselves as human beings and the extent to which that is related to the human rights discourse. Now, among the alternative worldviews, let's look at some of the perspectives that reflect on nature. For example, the right of Mother Earth. As we understand Mother Earth, or the Earth, or especially the dominant Western understanding, divides reality into something that has intrinsic worth and something that has instrumental value. By intrinsic worth, it means that the thing by itself has got inherent worth and value. And that intrinsic worth is bestowed upon human beings. Human life has intrinsic worth. But the rest, nature, animals, and the natural world generally is regarded as having instrumental value. That means to simply make the life of the human person to fulfill the interest of the human being. But this type of understanding is not necessarily universal. For example, on the basis of the Adian spiritual worldview, the idea of Earth as Pachamama was taken as central to existence, to all life. In that understanding, human beings are not regarded as superior. They are instead looked as equal to other entities. For example, the Ecuador Constitution in 2008 recognized the right of Mother Earth. In that Constitution, Article 71 provides that nature, or Pachamama, where life is reproduced and occurs, has the right to integral respect for its existence and for the maintenance and regeneration of its life cycles, structure, functions, and evolutionary processes. Article 72 provides nature has the right to be restored. This restoration shall be apart from the obligation of the states and natural persons or legal entities to compensate individuals and communities that depend on affected natural systems. Now, we can understand from this is that nature is regarded as a person that is entitled to have certain rights, and it has the right to be restored, it has the right to be protected. Similarly, the Bolivian law as well recognizes this, where it says, where the understanding is that Mother Earth is regarded as sacred, fertile, and the source of life that feeds and cares for all living beings in her womb. She is in permanent balance, harmony, and communication with the cosmos. She is comprised of all ecosystems and living beings and their self-organization. So understanding nature in this way actually allows the generation of systems, processes that would enforce the protection of nature as a being that is important to support life. And this is really, if you compare it to the Western understanding of nature, this is totally opposite. Because in the Western understanding of nature, nature is simply regarded as a resource. Whatever we see in the world out there is just a resource to be used, to be utilized, to be consumed, or to be used in a certain way by human beings. So that process has caused significant environmental destruction in the world as we know today. So alternative understandings of rights as nature having inherent rights, inalienable rights like human beings, becomes an important way of looking at human rights. And the Universal Declaration of Rights of Mother Earth is another example. In that Article 1, for example, provides that Mother Earth is a living being. Mother Earth is a unique, indivisible, self-regulating community of interrelated beings that sustains, contains, and reproduces all beings. Each being is defined by its relationship as an integral part of Mother Earth. Now, this is an important development because, the Earth is again recognized as having rights. Even if you read further that declaration in Article 2, you find that Mother Earth and all beings of which she is composed have the following inherent rights: the right to life and to exist, the right to be respected, the right to regenerate its biocapacity and to continue its vital cycles and processes free from human disruptions, the right to maintain its identity and integrity as a distinct, self-regulating and interrelated being, the right to water and as a source of life, the right to clean air, the right to internal health, the right to be free from contamination, pollution, and toxic and radioactive waste, the right to not have its genetic structure modified or disrupted in a manner that threatens its integrity or vital and healthy functioning, the right to full and promote restoration for violations of the rights recognized in this declaration caused by human activity. So it allows compensation when damage occurs to the earth, and it also protects its integrity and biodiversity. This is an important development. As you can see, this entire legal system is not necessarily based on the traditional old beliefs and rituals. It's actually on the basis of those beliefs which recognize through their religion or through their tradition nature or Pachamama as an important source of life. Then they brought in modern time requirements or challenges like pollution, like contamination with toxic waste, and they try to respond to these challenges by recognizing pre-existing beliefs and ideas in relation to Pachamama, which is Mother Earth. Other movements, for example, the Zapatistas in Mexico, resisting the government in order to enforce their collective rights, is another important development. They were trying to defend their natural environment from companies and other entities that exploit those resources. And the African Human Rights Charter on Human and People's Rights is also another important example that says, for example, that all people have the right to existence in Article 20. So this is also an important development which accepts the existence of communal rights, not just individual rights, but the rights of peoples as collectives to have the rights to exist as such. Now, we can also look at other alternative worldviews or perspectives that could inform potentially human rights. And you probably will learn more about Mahatma Gandhi in the future on the third units, just to reflect on few points here. As you know, his philosophy is very much based on Hinduism. And in his philosophy of Satyagraha, for example, this is a philosophy of action, and it has three important elements. And the first one is Satya, and second is Ahimsa, and the third one is Tapasya. Now, by Satya refers to truth, and Graha by itself is a form of insistence on truth. It's not that a person would have a complete understanding of truth, but instead strives to achieve truth by through right conduct, through Ahimsa and Tapasya. So life from this perspective becomes a striving to achieve truth. And Satyagraha is a person's insistence to achieve truth without using violence, because truth and non-violence becomes the different faces of the same coin. In the Satyagraha understanding, the notion of Ahimsa is very important. Ahimsa simply means non-violence, not to use force, to use the soul force instead of the physical force in order to win the enemy. The idea is because devotion to truth is the sole purpose of existence from this perspective. And life is regarded as self-realization through non-violence. So from this perspective, in humanity or human failure is, or in the inability to understand truth, these weaknesses are weaknesses that we all share. These are common human predicaments. But the person who lives in accordance with Satyagraha tries to overcome this by allowing himself or herself to suffer instead of causing suffering on others, and by using only non-violence means. That means Ahimsa becomes a type of killing violence by not committing violence. So this is important because it also has an important principle within it that requires a person not to cooperate with evil, because it is everyone's responsibility not to do or not to harm or not to become part of falsehood. And tapasya is not simply pacification, it's not simply cowardice, you just allow yourself to become a victim. Instead, it is a form of sacrifice, it's a form of heroism, it's a form of soul force that tries to achieve truth by allowing oneself to suffer. It is a form of freedom from fear instead of becoming afraid and hence allow oneself to suffer. Now, this is just another example that tells you how rights might be realized. Instead of trying to achieve an outcome by the use of force and power, this approach tries to ignite, tries to cultivate, tries to awaken the human that is silent, that is dormant in everyone's life. Another interesting perspective is from China, Zhangzai's philosophy. He was a philosopher who lived from 1020 to 1077 in China. And according to his philosophy, he has this idea of forming one body with the universe. The idea is that the human being is not simply isolated from other beings around him or her and is encapsulated within the skin or within the clothes. Instead, the human being is part of a larger body of the universe, where he says, for example, heaven is my father and earth is my mother. And even such a small creature as I finds an intimate place in their midst. Therefore that which fills the universe I regard as my body, and that which directeth the universe I regard as my nature. All people are my brothers and sisters, and all things are my companions. The great ruler is the eldest son of my parents, heaven and earth, and the great ministers are his stewards. Respect the aged. This is a way to treat them as elders should be treated. Show deep love toward the orphaned and the weak. This is a way to treat them as young should be treated. The sage identifies his character with that of heaven and earth. The worthy is the most outstanding man. Even those who are tired, infirm, crippled, or sick, those who have no brothers or children, wives or husbands are all my brothers who are in distress and have no one to turn to. One who knows the principles of transformation will skillfully carry forward the undertaking of heaven and earth, and one who penetrates the spirit to the highest degree will skillfully carry out their will. Wealth, honor, blessing, and benefits are meant for the enrichment of my life, while poverty, humble station, and sorrow are meant to help me to fulfillment. In life I follow and serve heaven and earth. In death I will be at peace. Now, this gives you a totally different way of understanding the meaning of existence. The meaning of existence in this philosophy actually allows us to imagine the possibility of existing in the world by seeing ourselves as members or as participants or as relational beings. So what seems to separate us doesn't actually separate us, but instead relates us. So what exists between individuals, between groups, between entities is actually something that relates them, not something that separates them. Another example is the African notion, in the African worldview, the example of the Dogon myth of creation. For example, that in that myth, there is this notion of God called Ama. Ama, God, created the earth as a woman and married her. His seed, Nomo, is water and fire and blood and word. Nomo is a physical, spiritual life force which awakens all sleeping forces and gives physical and spiritual life. So this understanding make us imagine that we actually are participants in a universe of forces that exist within us. And if you look at Kagame's characterization of the four categories of African philosophy, he talks about things. All things and beings are under these four categories. The first one is Muntu or Bantu. That represents human beings. And Muntu includes Bazima, the living, and Bazimu, the dead. Kintu represents thing. Hantu represents place and time, and Kuntu replaces modality. This provides you a form of life, a form of existence that connects the past, the future, and the present, the living and the non-living, the dead together. As John, for example, says, the dead are not living, but they exist in light of African philosophy. The loans are forces, and in possession, man takes these forces into himself, intensifies his own nature, intensifies the force he himself is. He experiences himself as force through communication with superhuman forces, and experiences his ties, religio, with these forces. So it means that, this traditional ritual or these traditional understandings that exist within society actually have their own way of defining reality and keeping people together as communities and allowing them to see each other as beings with dignity. Ubuntu is another example, and I believe most of you could get information easily on Ubuntu. It basically means that I am human because you are. I cannot be human without you. This is in contradiction with Rene Descartes' idea of I think, therefore I am, which means in Rene Descartes' idea, the modern Western understanding of who I am, or understanding of the self or individualism, is that, I exist because I have the capacity to think, because I have a thinking mind, my mind in separation from the other. So everything else is an object of my reflection, and I am a being who have the capacity to think. But in this case, what Ubuntu suggests is I exist not because I can think, but because I am related to the world. I cannot exist as a human being. I wouldn't have any meaning. I wouldn't know what I am without the existence of the world outside of me. So it emphasizes relatedness instead of separation. Now, you can see that there are many perspectives that reinforce this idea. The notion of being, for example, is very much seen as something related to different categories. A being is defined on the basis of its relationship to land, to ancestors, to beliefs, to ethnicity, to religion, to gender, to authority, and to age. These things are important, and depending on which aspect you are emphasizing, the meaning of the being could vary from context to another. And the notion of belonging is also another important concept. One belongs on the basis of obligation, on the basis of kin, on the basis of how he or she is buried, on the basis of the existence of accountability, gift, even witchcraft. So these are things that relate people, that create a sense of belonging. Now, if we look at communities that exist in the non-Western world, they don't exist necessarily on the basis of human rights or on the basis of existing laws, although in many places and areas, especially urban areas, this is important. But in many rural areas, people exist on the basis of different ideas of being and belonging. As, for example, Mbiti, in his book writes, whatever happens to the individual happens to the whole group, and whatever happens to the whole group happens to the individual. The individual can only say, I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. So when we understand human life as relatedness to the world, as relatedness to ancestors, to the past and the future, our relationship with the environment, our relationship with each other becomes different from how we would imagine these things in relation to human rights. Another example is the Ethiopian conception of what a human nature constitutes, what a human being constitutes. In the Ethiopian Orthodox understanding of human nature, for example, human beings have two basic characteristics. The first characteristics, which is in the center, involves the characteristics of the soul, and the four characteristics outside are the characteristics of the flesh. Now, human beings, as beings that have soul, have the capacity to speak, which means they have language, the capacity to live forever, which means eternity, and the capacity to think, which is consciousness. So these are attributes of the human soul. And the human flesh have four characters. It starts from air, which is nafas, air, and it's also categorized usually on the basis of age. So from birth to up to 20 years, a person becomes or lives like air. That person becomes very fast, agile, and becomes an air. And then its life stage changes to fire when that person reaches the age of 20 and up to 40. In that age, the person becomes powerful, strong, but as well also dangerous. And the person turns into the water stage, into a stage of reflection, into a stage of reconciling others. Or, for example, as water extinguishes fire, if the youngsters at fire stage are fighting or arguing, then the person in a water stage, the older person, can reconcile them, can extinguish the fire or solve the problem. And then finally the person dies when he or she reaches the stage of soil or merit. Now, these categories allow the communities or societies to develop behaviors that respond to this categorization. Older people become, for example, quite respected on the basis of these classifications. So what this gives us is that the conception of who I am in relation to, for example, Descartes' modern Western philosophy was that Descartes divided himself between his mind and his body. The division between mind and body, the division between the self and the other, is at the center of modern Western philosophy. But the non-Western philosophies try to emphasize different ways of imagining and understanding what a human being looks like. In conclusion, we can raise certain pointers that might help us reflect on the implication of these ideas on human rights. I have tried to say from the beginning that when I talk about the West, I am referring to the existence of a system of power relationship, a system of power on the basis of political, economic, racial, cultural, military, knowledge and other hegemony or other means of or resources of power. So the West is not simply a racial categorization. When I say West, I'm not simply referring to Europeans or white people. I am referring instead to a system of power that allows individuals to benefit from that system. Because this system is very much dominant in this regard, then we look at people who are participating in the system, although they are from social locations that are not within Europe, then those people can also be regarded as Western. So understanding a non-Western perspective is trying to imagine human rights from the perspective of those who are outside the system of power relationship, the system that benefits, those who are involved in that system. That might be because their sense of reality is different. Their social location in the world is different. They are not integrated in the global economy. There might be various reasons. But what we also try to understand when we think about human rights from a non-Western perspective is to start not from this abstract individual that is out there and wants to become free, but from the experience of those people who are suffering. Because the normal Western understanding of human rights, when we say human rights, what type of a human person does it bring into our mind? Can we imagine a woman, a disabled person, or an aged person, or a person who is living in a certain ritual, traditional, indigenous person? There are so many varieties and diversities of lives in the world. So how about starting or considering suffering as a starting point of responding to the needs and rights of individuals? And another point is, how about responding on the basis of local experience? Because in the global world that we live in, not all people have a similar experience. So it is impossible, it is difficult to present a universal definition of what common rights should look like for all people. So instead of arriving at a simple definition of rights, let's base on local experience and respond to local demands. For example, An-Naim, a philosopher, Islamic philosopher, argued that before we arrive at universalism on an international stage, we have to find within the local culture what is universal for everyone. And people should get together and try to create a possible ground for the legitimacy of human rights at the local level before they go up into the international level. Now, I would like to encourage you to think about this more. What is the importance of thinking about human rights beyond the Western perspective? Do you think some of the experiences, the perspectives, the beliefs, the religious ideas that might be relevant, important to reimagine human rights? Can you explore local stories and beliefs in relation to human rights? How can human rights be reimagined? And what is the role of religion in this? I encourage you to participate on the discussion board and to explore this topic more in the future. And thank you for your attention. Goodbye.